Everybody, welcome back to Thriving on Mission, and we are here now for our 6th episode that we're recording. And as always, here with Quinn Harris, our producer. Hey, Quinn.
Hello.
And also a special guest with me today is my awesome best friend, Tim Denton.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here.
Special in more ways than one.
That's right. And so we're going to blow everybody's minds today because, and Tim, I shared with you a little bit already. Quinn, I texted you, but, even though this is the 6th episode we're recording, by nature of what I want us to talk about today, I feel it is so important. It's actually going to be the 2nd episode we're going to release as we get into this. So I'm going off script already. My big plan, my PowerPoint and checklist, which I know I like to have, but we're just going to change things up a little bit.
Just wing it.
Just going to wing it. That's right.
Well, it's for a good reason, too.
Yeah. And so I'm also going to make a bold statement today. And that statement is going to be that I completely trust that there will be somebody that listens to this episode that it'll save their life. And not because of you or me, or the great editing or any of that stuff. Or at least we're going to offer them the opportunity, I think, through some of the information we're going to share. And and again, just from that first episode, and the ones we've recorded so far, I'm saying that humbly. I'm saying that it's not anything I'm doing. It's not my story. But again, I'm being given an opportunity to share what's on my heart from experiences, especially what we're going to talk about, that you and I had the shared experience last week that will save somebody's life. And so I know that's a bold statement, but.
Well, expound on that. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, again, for veterans, for spouses, and there might be somebody in the audience who's always thinking, coronavirus? No, this has nothing to do with the coronavirus at all. But this is about veterans' lives in regards to the veterans that are committing suicide, marriages that are falling into divorce, and just guys and gals, veterans who have lost their way and purpose. And, and it's heartbreaking. So with that, let's get into it. So what we're going to talk about this week is a program that you and I got to go to last week, and it's called the organization is called the Mighty Oaks Foundation, and this is another an organization for veterans. And they actually also do stuff with first responders as well too, which is really awesome. But I'm just going to read their mission, and then we'll sort of talk a little bit about the background.
Okay.
So from one of their handouts, the mission of the Mighty Oaks Foundation is to serve and restore our nation's warriors and families who have endured hardship through their service to America, and help them find a new life purpose through hope in Christ and our resiliency and peer-to-peer recovery programs. So this is a faith-based program, which, again, for the people that know me, know my story, I mean, it should be obvious. Obviously, there's some great, secular programs out there too for veterans, but I mean, this one is faith-based. But to participate in any of these programs, you don't have to be a Christian, which, again, I thought that was cool.
Well, as we found out last week, the majority of the guys that attended the program, say 95% of them, had an understanding or a belief. And, there's always one or two that want to attend regardless, as we were talking about before the show started.
Right.
With the hope that he can just see things from a Christian perspective.
Yeah.
And it was pretty powerful.
Right.
It was a lot of information, and hopefully he goes back with just a slightly different perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Because, I mean, everything they're saying, obviously we have that biblical worldview, and so we believe it to be true, but it's still true regardless. The things they're teaching about character and dignity and purpose, those are all timeless things. And so even non-believers, obviously the goal is to introduce them to Christ if they don't have a relationship with him, but
Well, if I may, you read the mission statement. These are the goals. When I was reading through their literature, the Mighty Oaks Foundation has goals in mind as veterans go through the program, and one of the goals is to eliminate the veteran suicide, one person, one community at a time, which is still a very big deal. I don't know what the number's at right now, 20, 21, 22 of suicides committed per day of veterans, but that's a lot.
Yeah.
And so one of their goals is to, bring that down, eliminate it, one veteran at a time. And another goal, it says here, is to invoke the decline of military and veteran divorce rates. And they do that by, they talk a lot in their classes about marriages and about husband and wife roles. And of course, they talk a lot about passivity. But a third goal that Mighty Oaks has is develop healthy family legacies. And, that could mean a couple different things to a couple different people. But, that, for me, that was one of the biggest lessons or the takeaways that I got from the program, was just how important it is, not necessarily to leave a legacy, because everybody's going to leave a legacy. It's
Good point.
What do you want your legacy to look like? Your wife, your kids, your close friends. How are they going to view you after you've gone? So legacies are pretty important. And then the fourth goal for the Mighty Oaks Foundation is, train the warriors to be resilient in the face of everyday trials. Now, you think about it. There's stuff that we deal with, veterans specifically, that we deal with day to day, that in many ways we there's no guideline on how to deal with that, whether it's post-traumatic stress, just relationships, marriages, family. It's just the trials look different for everybody, but I think the program did a really good job of addressing those. At least things to try to, minimize strife in the household, and to just things to equip you for those everyday trials.
Yeah.
And then finally, the last goal of the Mighty Oaks Foundation is to bring encouragement to the veterans and to serve and impact their communities. Whether that's at your church, in your neighborhood, around your friends, I think, being encouraging the veterans just to be something positive in their community is huge. And we'll probably touch on that a little bit, but I thought it was worth bringing up the goals.
No, definitely. Definitely.
After the mission statement, so they kind of get a better idea of what this program's about.
Yeah.
And it was pretty impactful.
Yeah. And they have various programs, and again, we'll jump into that here in a minute, to accomplish these goals. Mm-hmm. People can go to their website, mightyoaksprograms.org. They can read more about it. They can sign up for the programs. We'll put a link, all that normal stuff. A couple of the guys that started it, again, you can look on there. There's some great YouTube videos of their stories. A guy named Chad Robichaud and Jeremy Stallnecker, both combat veterans who were dealing with stuff, and ultimately decided that they wanted to make a stand and a difference, and also do it for other veterans. So they've got a great team behind them. I mean, we experienced part of, some of the team last week, and just they're doing incredible work. So, Tim, how did you hear about the Mighty Oaks programs? Because we didn't hear about it together at the same time.
No, it's kind of interesting that we eventually came together and decided we were going to try to attend it as a group. I attended a Wounded Warrior program, Project Odyssey, as they like to call it, where it's a 5-day marriage. It's not a seminar. It's just you go, you meet with roughly 15 to 20 other couples, and it's really just trying to help veterans and their spouses deal with some of the stressors after coming back from deployment, transitioning out of the military, or even some guys that have been out for some time and they're trying to figure out how to deal with the baggage they've stuffed deep down inside. So the Project Odyssey for the Wounded Warrior Project was something that they paid for. Travel, you get there, they feed you, they give you a place to sleep in the form of a hotel room, and you just show up and participate. And I'll tell you, the Project Odyssey that I went to, Lisa and I went to one in the Panhandle of Florida, and it was amazing. Completely changed the perception I had of Wounded Warrior Project. I guess early on they ran into some issues with their leadership and where the money was going to where it is now. We were blessed with an incredible speaker and some awesome events. Well, while I was on that Project Odyssey with Lisa, another couple that was there from the state of Washington, the guy had on a T-shirt. It said Mighty Oaks Foundation and had some stuff on the back, and I think there was a Bible verse on the back of his shirt. And we were standing in line to get something to eat, and so I'd never heard of it. And so we talked a little bit about that, but as I came to find out, it's kind of like Fight Club. What goes on in Fight Club stays in Fight Club. You just don't talk about it. But what he did tell me is it was life-changing. It was spiritually impactful, and he recommended I go. Yeah. So that was about a year ago.
Yeah.
And then this dovetails into how you found out about it, which you found out about it, in Montana just a couple months after I did. And you and I didn't talk about it.
Yeah, that's what was
until
funny.
August. It's
right. And Providence, if you will. Because I was up in Montana on a Tadpole Trip, which again, because we're doing these episodes, this episode is going to come before where I talk about Tadpole and I was even thinking too, I didn't really tell people. I mean, obviously people who know us, know you, know me, know our history, but also for the other listeners, I just want to say real quick that, Tim is a combat veteran, served for 26 years, served for 15, how many in the 160th?
18.
18 years in the 160th, which means multiple combat deployments.
A couple.
Just a couple, and so, but again, we'll reintroduce him later on. And, so I was on this Tadpole Trip, and just at some point during one of the evenings that we had, some guys were sharing some stories, and two guys shared their experience. And after I was talking a little bit, one of them came up to me, or both of them actually came up to me at separate times and said, Matt, you really ought to consider going to this. It's awesome. It's, you really will, get something out of it.
They were talking about Mighty Oaks?
About Mighty Oaks,
okay.
yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, then we linked up in August, applied, and now here we are, just a little bit over a week since when we showed up there last week. So, and the program we actually went to was called the Legacy Program. And so when people go on their website, there's a Legacy Program for men's, and there's a Legacy Program for women. So, and again, a neat thing about this program is that if you're a spouse of a veteran, and not necessarily combat veteran too, that there's no, that was what this was sort of born out of, but you don't have to have experienced combat, because veterans, just by nature of the beast, deal with different things differently.
Which we, proved last week. There were a couple guys in our group that didn't have combat experience, and we had those discussions about, I'm not in the same category, or my story isn't. They didn't come out and say it, but they were alluding to my story is not as impactful as yours because I didn't have combat experience. The instructors at Mighty Oaks did a really good job of explaining to them that it's really not anything that's specific to combat. It's the trials and things that we go through as vets that that they were trying to get us to discuss and open up about and share our testimony, and with the hopes that we'd be able to make things a lot more manageable.
Sure. Yeah. Obviously, it can be. So spouses can attend these programs too, And, whether you're a male spouse or a female spouse, you would still go to the appropriate same-sex program. And, just we were just talking again before this episode. A really cool thing is the fact that both of our wives, I think Saturday night or Sunday night, they submitted their applications, right?
And we were on the way home from the Mighty Oaks program. We shared our stories with our wives, and they were on the computer signing up.
Yeah.
On their way home.
Yeah, so I'm super excited that they're going to be going to that program. A different location, but because they do have locations all over the country, and no cost to veterans, to the guys who are going. So, and again, we're thankful for the people that have given for that. So
that's a blessing.
So we talked a little about how we heard about it, and I think we've both alluded to why we went. Basically, somebody, or at least for me, somebody said, "Hey, you should try this," and thankfully, I didn't let my pride get in the way, because that's an easy thing to do.
Yeah, it's always interesting how I think I've been to a couple of these, not peer group, but just veteran nonprofit gatherings where, speaking of letting pride get in the way, just where you can almost talk yourself out of attending and rationalize your way into, what, I don't really need to go to this, or I got more important things to do, or this really doesn't apply to me,
or there's somebody else worse off and I might be taking their spot.
Exactly. And then we go through the program, and at the end of it, it's like, man, I am so glad I went. It was not only a blessing to me, but I got to meet some people that I can relate to, that kind of have the same background that I do, that I'm now keeping in touch with. And, I think that's how it's designed to work, is we kind of let our guard down a little bit, share a little bit about ourselves. And a couple things come out of that. One is that, we feel a huge release of just kind of letting something out of the dark that's been stuffed down inside for so long. But, the biggest thing is that it may positively impact somebody else, give somebody else some perspective, or at least allow them to feel like they're not alone in this fight.
Yeah.
And that's the awesome, dual benefit to something like this.
Yeah.
But back to what I was saying, you can almost talk yourself out of this.
Definitely.
If you're not careful. And that's the biggest mistake we can make is, let Satan kind of whisper in our ear how, this really doesn't apply to us, or, it's not for us, and when the exact opposite is true.
Yeah, exactly. I think we saw that on day one. And just for everybody, we're not going to talk specifics about how the course is structured, how, exactly the things that are talked about, other than, it is based on the Bible, and, but there's lots of time to get to know each other vets, and they ask us, not to keep things secret, but, there is a level of authenticity and confidentiality that occurs. And, in fact, because it used to be called Fight Club, these legacy programs. And what's the first rule of Fight Club?
We don't talk about Fight Club.
That's right. And so I think one of their little sayings that they had was trust the process.
That's right.
And because it's hard to, and especially, and you could see that in people at different, and manifesting in different ways there. I know, again, it's hard for me to trust the process, especially, from the things that I've gone through, referencing therapy, different therapies I've tried, different counselors I've talked to, and some I've been able to pull little nuggets from, but then some I'm like, that was just a waste of time. And again, that was probably more I guarantee that was more my fault than theirs, I think. But, to say, all right, I'm going to trust the process. And what would you say is the biggest reason that, and probably for each of us it's going to be different, but why, for this one in particular, did you say, especially after like maybe day one or day two, did you say, all right, I'm going to trust the process. I'm going to trust this program. I'm going to trust these instructors.
Wow, that's a good question. I think you started to allude to the point after initially getting there. Day one of the program really was just about going over, doing an overview of the program and introducing the staff, introducing each of the vets. And, there were a couple people specifically that were coming up with avenues of dissent to get out of there because they saw that, hey, this isn't for me. I'm not going to get anything out of this. I don't know if I can, because when they saw the weekly outline, and one of the days is like a testimony where you give up and you get up in front of the group and share as much or as little about yourself. And I think, and I know I read into that, and I thought, man, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I have the courage to do that. And then we had a friend that, was second guessing, not just their ability to do that, but just their desire to unleash all this pent up frustration and anger. And it was at that point that I realized that I probably had some of the same reservations. So probably the first full day of being there, I really had to tell myself that this program is outlined like this for a reason. They've had a lot of guys before me go through it. There'll be a lot after me. I really just have to kind of stay the course and like you said, trust the process. And that's what I had to convey to our friend that was feeling the same way. That God has you here for a reason. Your story is meaningful and relevant, and that if you kind of just trust the process, after all this is over with, there will be a feeling of not just accomplishment, but fast forwarding to the end, he shared his story, and it impacted a lot more people than he thought it was going to.
Yeah,
and it was an amazing story of just what he's been dealing with and battling. And so that was truly an example of people second guessing, listening to, I guess the devil on their shoulder kind of saying, hey, dude, this isn't for you. You need to get up and run as fast as you can. To really, listening to the counsel he was getting, writing it out, and then in the end, kind of looking back and saying, man, I'm glad I did that. And it was tough. I'll admit that, going through this program from start to finish, engaging in the discussions and the breakout groups and, being transparent, not putting on a face like I'm so good at doing. And just really, it's one of those programs you get out of it, honestly, what you put into it.
Yeah.
And there were, as always, there's a couple people that, put minimal effort in, and I'm sure that those would be the people that got the least amount out of it. But kind of a long-winded way of saying yes, trusting the process is key, especially in a situation where you don't have, the whole itinerary to make a decision, early on. They purposely withhold that until you've shown up and said, all right, I'm ready to do this.
Right.
Because the guys will analyze it and they'll say, yeah, that's not for me.
Sure. I could totally see, getting the schedule or getting, if I was to get this workbook beforehand, and I could have looked through it and gone, man, I know this stuff.
This is basic. I don't really need this course.
So why should I go? And, I think, I remember that, that first night too. And I'm thankful that I got to be there for our friend, and to see him come out on the other side of where he's at. So, but for me, it was more, because again, the information here was not information that was really new to me. Right. I mean, maybe some of it, but the way it was packaged, and not in a pretty way, but, a lot of thought and prayer and, I guess, heart and love went into the way they prepared this program and the way they've set it up. But the instructors right away, they're demonstrating maturity, leadership, authenticity, and they all had these incredible stories, that they were willing to share right away, which began to create this environment. And they've got that resume of veteran, and most of them combat veterans, And the fact, and some of them were now police officers, and again, have just had some incredibly crazy stuff already have happened to them in that period of time.
Oh, and there's stories of how they came to Christ through, excuse me, either through this program or prior to, but usually as a result of just an incredible story leading up to their conversion, and
yeah,
it was amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, and so that you're right, that gave it that sense of authenticity, which then, as they were being transparent and sharing their story, I guess made us feel like that was just giving us a sense of comfort,
right,
to be able to do the same.
Yeah. It was that, just from what we saw in the military, when you have a leader that is demonstrating servant leadership, the one who's making sure all of his guys eat first, he's the first one through the door, he's the first one to pick up and do the hard thing, you're going to follow him. I mean, there's that attractiveness, because if he's willing to do it, I'm going to do it. And I think
right.
For us, and, that's why it was so attractive. And, you and I have both experienced a lot of different, men's ministry stuff in churches,
right,
since we've been believers. Promise Keepers being a large event, down to smaller retreats and, even Bible studies. And they're good. But I think, you and I have always sort of felt on the outside in some ways, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way. And
I know
again,
what you mean.
Maybe it's pride, and I think a lot of veterans maybe feel that way sometimes, and again, not that people are trying to either alienate veterans, and not that they're trying to, not that veterans are like, well, I'm better than you. But again, it's just this weird thing that I can't even describe.
Yeah, I know what you speak of, and it's really a mental game. Where I specifically at a church that I went to for such a long time, and trying to dive into the men's ministry, always using I got a deployment coming up as to why you didn't jump in feet first and just deal with it later, as far as your deployment. So I was always having a deployment coming up, or I was always just getting back from the deployment, so I missed out on an event in the men's ministry, and then I couldn't volunteer for this Easter program, or I couldn't do this, and I felt justified. And it wasn't until much later that I realized that I talked myself out of so much by convincing myself that I didn't want to invest too much into this, because I was just going to get disappointed because I was leaving or just coming back. And I explained to you, and we'll save this for another time, but there's a period of a couple of years there where I was physically home from combat, but really emotionally and mentally, I never really came home, because I was still out there on the battlefield, because we'd come home for a couple of months, we'd leave for a couple of months, we'd come home. So that cycle really prevented me from investing. Well, I talked myself out of investing because of my cycle, the deployment cycle. So. Yeah, you're right. It's amazing what we can talk ourselves into and out of, but we don't realize later on down the road that it was to our own detriment. Yeah.
And I think, and I'm going to say something, this might be controversial.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah. Quick, turn the recorder. Oh, wait, it is on. But society, especially the American culture and the American society, maybe to our detriment a little bit as far as veterans, gives us a pass sometimes. And I'm not... Again, I understand, and people appreciate our service. People appreciate what we've done for our country. But again, then we can take on this victim mentality when sometimes the way that's communicated, to where at Mighty Oaks, it was almost a finger in the chest.
Right.
Of what, and those guys could do it.
Well, they can do it unlike anybody else in your church, or nobody else can really say, "Listen, I know what you're going through," and thump you in the chest and tell you to snap out of it.
Right.
These guys kind of called you out.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need that.
Yeah. Amen. So it was a great week. Were you able to lose any weight up there?
It reminded me of the cruise I went on, a couple years ago, where it seemed like all you're doing is eating. But I will say the graduation day dinner
Oh,
It's probably the best meal I've ever had, if not like, the top 5 as far as just, it was Peruvian chicken with lamb lollipops, and
it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy.
it was, it wasn't just, the different stuff they had, but it was the guy that made this stuff, and he was a veteran that volunteered his money and his time and his talent to, put on this dinner that was just incredible.
Yeah.
But this guy should be a chef. And I know he owned a different local
Right.
business, but it was some of the best food I ever had. But to answer your question, no, I don't think I lost a single pound
Yeah. I might have even found a couple too, but
that you'd
You know.
lost the month prior.
that's right. Yeah. Well worth it though. Well worth it. So, you and I haven't just been sitting here talking just for our enjoyment, although I do enjoy it. The only thing we're missing is a cup of coffee right now. And we're not talking specifically just to get press for the Mighty Oaks program so they can get more money. However,
Although it would be nice.
Yeah, that will be nice. Would be nice. I mean, it is all privately funded. And so obviously people can go to that website. If they're looking for organizations to give to, that's a great one. We are a product of people that have given,
That's right. Good point.
But I think, the reason I wanted to do this, and I said that at the beginning, is I believe that there's somebody out there that will listen to this show right now and it could save their life. Because we heard stories of guys that were there and it's heartbreaking. Guys that were, again, Providence, but they were so close to taking their lives. And thankfully they didn't. And thankfully they were at the program. And it was heartbreaking. And knowing that, again, we have friends that I'm sure that are in that same boat somewhere, whether that's, somewhere in that darkness, and so I think, I've already told a couple people. I know you've already told a couple people about the program. We've been handing out these pamphlets here that we've got, great pamphlets that the Mighty Oaks has, and sharing this great resource. And so, again, they use a specific term. I think when we got the email that, hey, it's a week out. Do you remember what that was? Where there that challenge that was sort of in there?
You might have to refresh my memory. I've slept since then.
If what you
Been
have
trying up to this point hasn't worked, why not try something new?
right. And that's so true, and so I think, a challenge that I want to issue to people who are listening. And again, we both have really good friends that have already listened to the first episode. I've gotten some great feedback, very, very heart-moving, emotional feedback that I really appreciate. And I would encourage, those guys, those gals to sign up.
Well, at least go check out the website. Find out a little bit more about the foundation. Some people may feel led to just donate. I know they have.
Sure.
And for the vets and even the spouses, they have the legacy programs like you talked about. But something cool for the married guys and gals is the weekend to remember that Mighty
right.
Mighty Oaks doesn't put this on. It's through another program, but they get vouchers. So they will, through the Mighty Oaks Foundation, will pay for a married couple to go attend a weekend to remember, which is like a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, essentially a marriage retreat.
Right.
And the Mighty Oaks covers it.
And that's anywhere in the United States.
Yeah, there are quite
all
a few
over.
locations.
Right.
Like if you looked on the website, it would tell you where the closest one is to where you live. But and the only requirement is one of the spouses has had to go through the legacy program.
Okay.
And then once you accomplish that, then you become eligible to go to the weekend to remember. And anytime you get an opportunity to work on your marriage, after of course working on yourself a little bit, I think it'll go a long way. And I would encourage everybody just to look at the different programs Mighty Oaks has to offer and see which one would fit where you're at in life, which season of life you're in. But definitely give it a look and maybe leave Matt some feedback as to what you thought. I know it has impacted me, and my wife is going to a legacy program, and then once she gets back later on in the year, we'll both go to the Weekend to Remember.
Yeah.
And, we're just very thankful for that opportunity.
Yeah, same. We plan to do a Weekend to Remember as well, and I think that's through Crew Ministries, if I remember right. Another Christian ministry, which again, that's just another reason I love this organization and some of these things, because it's not one organization saying, hey, we're going to try and do it all. It's, they're partnering with other organizations. And also, and again, this will probably be something I definitely talk about in later episodes, but they partner with the local church in a specific way through alumni and trying to set up some.
Oh, you're talking about the Outpost.
The Outpost, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. A lot of different programs. That's on the website as well.
Right. And so, and again, if as you and I continue our, processing the information, maybe that's something that we're going to start here in the Savannah area.
That would be great.
Because again, we both know a lot of veterans, both active and ones that are, guys that aren't serving anymore, that could benefit from this.
I think that would be great. It'd be worth looking into.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll have, we'll make sure that these website links, they're all going to be in the show notes, all that standard stuff, and if, again, just like people have already been doing it, if they have questions about this program, if they want to know more information from me or from Tim, whether that's they can email through the website, thrivingonmission.com. People have already found the Facebook page, Thriving on Mission, and just ask those questions or feedback. And again, I really appreciate some of the comments and questions. And again, not to, hey, look at me, but again, there is a bond that exists between so many of us that we have with guys and gals that are now out or still in, again, just around the world. So,
and you just never really know how your story can impact others to the point where they'll share their story and impact 2 or 3 people, and then it just a waterfall effect from there. But like you said, more importantly, it's to at some point it could possibly save a life.
Yeah.
And that's one of the 5 goals that Mighty Oaks has put out there publicly, is that they want to eliminate veteran suicides and preserve the family legacy. And I just think that's a worthy cause.
Yeah.
Much like your podcast, it's here just to shed some light on some very important subjects that people are either dancing around or lightly touching on. And I appreciate what you guys are doing here, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So thanks for being here, Tim, and for all of our listeners out there, we will see you next week. Thanks City Church, and also to Quinn for producing this episode.
Thanks, Quinn.